This is Trellis. This theme by Mediavine is expensive at $14.95 a month. Let's go ahead and rebuild it with popcorn. So we're going to use the base theme, which is the core Trellis theme, instead of any one of the one-offs, just because the core is the one that most people are used to. So their example on their website is this Curious Chickpea site. So we're going to go ahead and use this as our platform to build from. As you can see, it's got itself a logo menu and a top section. And then down below, it's got itself a post, blog section, archive, and a sidebar. So the core of it is understanding how to align all these pieces together to get the look of this from within Popcorn itself. As you scroll down, you end up coming down to their footer, which itself is a pretty standard footer with just the copyright claim. So we're going to use that as our layout itself for this build. So what we're going to do is get the install in place. We're going to get the theme installed and basically get ourselves prepared with our base layer. As always, I like to start from scratch with these so that you guys get to see all the way from endpoints. I don't want to skip pieces or chunks. It makes these videos a little bit longer, but I think helps everybody understand exactly what has to be done to make them work as you anticipate. So I always install Gutenberg. Unlike most people, the Gutenberg plugin itself is the beta and up and coming stuff. It's not the stuff that's in the editor, because the Gutenberg itself is the editor by default. This just gives you the extra abilities that come with the beta versions. And then I always enable the customizer because I want to have access to do some custom CSS if I need to. But now you can see the default site. This is Popcorn. There's a link in the description below if you're interested in purchasing it after you see everything. You can go ahead and make the same website replicated out. I'm going to go ahead and copy this logo and copy basically the content we have for that front site itself, so that way we can start assembling this piece together. So the first part is easy. We can start with the header, which is the Inline, because they have their logo on the side and then the menu on the right. So we can go ahead and upload that file. And we're going to go ahead and delete the tagline because we don't need it down below. This gets us all cleaned up and organized. Now, I always go back to the row, and for me, I like to go to the settings and styles. And if you go down to the bottom here, you'll see padding. And you can remove that extra padding around everything to pull that menu up tighter to the top. I like to try and keep the menu and navigation itself up to the top and as thin as possible. So here you'll click on add, and then you'll add a custom link. You could add a category here if you'd already built a category matching their categories. Since I'm not, and I'm just going to placeholder them, custom links works well because I can just name them whatever I want and duplicate out without a problem. So really, it's more personal preference here. You could build these categories, so if you had a blog already and you were doing this, you would just put your categories in there, or your pages, or however you have your menu set up. You could use it here. Since this is a blank install, I don't have anything on the site currently, so I've just got to go placeholder these so that you can see them take up the place. And then inside the navigation itself, you just check out everything that's here, make sure that you've got the size right, and for this, the decoration, because there's all capital, so adding text decoration allows you, or adding lettercase lets you choose capitalized so that they're always capital no matter what you put in there. This way they always look correct. And then color, we can choose the primary color, which is right now that popcorn color, but we do know what their website is. Primary color is this green. So what we're going to do is just use this little tool to just pick a color from their site and just go grab that green. Once I get that green, you can just go ahead and swap out the color up here. You can go into the colors, and then up at the top for the palette in the primary, and swap that color out. And now I can use that same primary green everywhere with just one click for color. So now we go ahead and we can back over. What we want to do is move over to the front page. And when you edit it, you'll see the front page still has the old header because the profile or the template holds it. So what you want to need to do is click on the three dots and you'll swap it over to the header inline. And now, boom, you've got that part done. So now you've got your home page having that in place as you hope for. We'll go ahead and open another tab real quick. That way we can, watch it on the front end. So now you can see we've got those pieces in place and they match up with what they have. Now we just check width, make sure that we're following what Trellis's width is, which I believe is 1200, but yeah, it's 1200. See, so 1200 pixels is about standard, and I know popcorn is by default, but I'm going to measure real quick. So within here you can see when you measure end to end, we come in and yeah, it's 1200. It's just 6 pixels of my bad targeting. So you already know where the right width to match their site. Now it's just assembling chunks. So take a look, and that looks like the logo is somewhere around 300 to 316 pixels wide, depending on how it's formatted. So we'll go ahead and tweak that inside here. So when you go there, you can go in and you got to make sure you select the logo, select the image itself, so you can change the size. That way you can set it to that same size and get it to be a match for theirs. And then you can go back and make sure that you've got the spacing, so they're pretty much out to the edges, so we'll go ahead and shrink out that padding. This will help make sure both of them don't pull in from the edges too much. And then the search isn't here. I've been talking to Phil about how to do a search, so hopefully we'll get a better understanding of search. But right here you add some space back so that we know that there's spacing between those items in the menu, and it's controlled. And then from there we can check real quick with inspect what size they are, because they aren't the same size as what we have on our site right now. So you can use computed to just see what the end result is. And so you can see it's coming from this one EM size. So I don't try and match their EM size because it's based on root file size or root sizes. So we're not going to match exactly unless we go change a whole bunch of the base of popcorn. So instead, we'll tweak around with this and try and see what we have that gets us close. Base should be a little bit bigger. I don't remember offhand what base size is, but when we inspect, I think it'll come out around probably 16 something. We go to computed just to go look and see. Oh, 18. Okay. So base is too big. So really the next thing is to take a look and see where it comes from, and it's going to tell you that it comes from the base font size inside popcorn. So you can go back into here and instead go back into the navigation itself, and you'll see when we go down we're in base, so we can switch it to small and we can take a look and see what it looks like on the front end. But yeah, I was going to say it's probably going to be too small then. So that dropped all the way down to 13. So we need something between the two of them. So you could really leave it if you wanted to, but you can click the button here and do an edited size. So you could like make it 16 pixels and like force a size. But preferably really what you want to do is find something that's close. So like between 0.8 and 1. So you would go in here and actually change this over to here and change pixels to EM or REM. And then you would pick a size in between. So 0.9 something is probably right. In the end, I would expect it's like 0.95, but we can look and see. Yeah, that got smaller. So let's go to REM instead, and we'll make this 0.9596 is probably better. But now we're getting close though. So now if we go adjust this up a little bit, now when we go take a look on the front end, we should be fairly close. Yeah, 1536. Yeah, basically we're the same size at this point. So that gets us close and gets us within the range of what we'd want. We can really quickly go check though and inspect and just make sure it's like 15.75, right? Yeah. So we're basically in range of that now. So we've got that buttoned up, and now we can go ahead and start looking at moving into the main content area itself. So you see this is like one big gray container across the top. As Kevin Geary says, everything in web is just boxes. And if you understand boxes, you'll understand how to make just about anything. So in here you've got the default box, which is the hero. And since it has nothing to do with how Trellis actually lays out, I'm just going to go ahead and purge it because it's not really going to do much for us in this place. So the easy way is give yourself the structure view, go up to the top little element and just delete it. And then you get the second section here. And this group, again, just like the first, doesn't really have a matching need on their site for Trellis. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete it too. Now we get down to just what we'll need, which is posts. We don't need the featured side though, so we can actually go in and within this group we can actually delete the sticky part out for featured posts because it's not needed. So thinning everything out so that we're going to work with just what we need to work with. And then down below is the buttons. Well, we don't need that group either because there's no buttons on Trellis. So with that gone, basically we're down to the footer, which we're going to edit out and basically convert into the footer to match their needs. And then what will be a custom section that will have to be up front. So we're going to go ahead and purge out some sections of this down below. But now we can start to work from the framework of what we have, which is we need to build the top box. So we can start with what already exists using the template post and do less work. We do want to add a group here in between though, because we do need to add a space inside there where we will contain it. So within here we can easily start to work on building out that layout for ourselves. And we have one of two ways. We can build our own or we can clone from what's below. So we're just going to copy for now. We'll probably pay for this later because whenever there's like the purple sections that are like a pre-built-in function, I don't think they can exist twice. So whenever we edit one, it's going to edit the other one. So at some point, we're either going to need to split this one off and be a single post and do some work, or we're going to have to split off the bottom one. So we'll go ahead and strip out these extra little bits because we don't need that latest post title itself. And then we can start actually constructing what this will look like itself, which is going to mean adjusting because that post itself is going to need to be image on the left and then content on the right with this background behind it. So we can set that as the background overall and get ourselves kind of looking correct. But we do have to kind of tweak around a little bit of this. We're going to almost rebuild this from scratch to get what we need to. So once this is in place, you notice it's too wide. So the next thing you would want to do then is basically take a look and see with this set at that row level, but we can go ahead and pull the columns down. This way we know there's not 3 posts, so we don't need 3 individual dividers. We just need the one to show up there. So when you look, now it's just 1 post and it's free to take up the space that it needs. So now it's just offset and too wide. So we can easily fix this if we go over and we edit this row and turn the row into a group. So what we should do is take the next size up and we'll convert this over to a group. It's not really convert, it's group everything that's inside of it. And this way we can set it to 1200 pixels. And when you go back to the front, you'll see it pull itself back in. So now it's back and contained in similar to everything else on the content. But now when you go through, you've got to try and rethink out the boxes strategy to get you what you need here. So for these ones, what you need is to basically move everything into a horizontally aligned row as opposed to stacked how it is. So in this group itself, when you go horizontally or vertically, you're not going to get much because this is the group before the query itself. So the template of the posts is what builds the template of how a post looks. So you can easily turn this to the side and you'll get everything laying out side by side by side, which is helpful because it's the first thing that has to be done, so we get a picture that can be stacked alone. But this one you just need to see width-wise what it is, so we can approximate that rendered size inside how we render it. So 275 by 366. So within us, all we have to do is go down and select the image, and then we can go over to the settings and move down towards the bottom here, and you'll see what you want to set. So here you can go ahead and set this as those two numbers and get that same size set up in place for you. That way we're a match for the size they have. But now you see that everything is kind of sideways stacked, so it's all one item after the next after the next. So we're going to go ahead and look at grouping things in a different order to try and figure out how we can best organize these pieces. And when they're in the group now, and they're stacked, so they're going to show from bottom to top, but the row shows left to right. But since they're all within the same container, they behave how you have the top container set up. So I definitely have this a little bit messy right now, but what we can do is make a group out of one so that we can have a group next to the featured image in the row and give ourselves a chance to split those two pieces and organize them as we need to. So the stack itself needs to go vertically. So what we need to do is just open up, move the featured image out. There we go. Now we've got the featured image in the row with the stack next to it. The stack itself is organized vertically. So we move this up, we can delete this extra row because it actually isn't doing anything for us. So now the template is right for us for this post. So now it's doing a header content button in that stack. So now we're way more aligned inside this whole template of posts. We can add a little bit of spacing if we felt like. We can do some tweaks to make this look a little bit more adjusted to how theirs looks like. So now we can just adjust the spacing around a little bit and just try and get it where it's got a little bit more padding around it to match what it looks like on the normal, which is it's got that background that goes around it a little bit more. And then we can look here and see how they have it set up, and it just looks like when you go look that the information here tells you the 36 pixels. Yeah, so it's a big title compared to these ones below. For our side, we can go ahead and we can tweak these. We can go down here and we can mess around with these sizes to try and get them to kind of match what we would anticipate theirs to look like. Once we get these in place, we can play around a little bit. And then for the button itself, we have to actually give it a class. We want to make it just something easy to remember because we're going to have to put it in custom CSS. So for me, I like to just use something like btn and then like read or whatever the function is. That way you can color it in and make it look like a button on the front end. So we'll save that. And now we can go ahead and check these pieces back out again. Yeah, what we're going to do now is actually get a copy of this post, basically, so that we have something to work with that matches the representation there. So on this side, we can just do a new post. We'll copy just the beginning parts to give us a place to work from. So the title and some intro text and the image and some of this stuff, just to have a section of information that'll show up within our post as we work on everything and have a good place to start with itself. This way we have a full functioning site to kind of work from as a front end to understand what we're displaying in data, and gets us a featured image and the ability to see it on the front end itself. That way when you go look at things, you can actually see representations, which helps when you're trying to build these to kind of align some of those pieces a little bit better. So now we've actually got some information in there. We can go ahead and add a featured image so that we actually get it to show up on the front end. And now we can start to see what we're working with. Yeah, so now we get to see when it rendered a little bit weirder than we anticipated, but it gives us something to work from now as opposed to what we had before, which was just not a fake image, but not representative of what it would look like as a final nude. What we need to do now is just take and figure out the right aspect ratio, which I feel is going to be like a 2:3 or 3:4. But we can look at a few of these just to see what they... Oh yeah, that one's way more what that looks like. So each one of these just to see what it looks like, but we want to probably stay with cover. This way it fills in that space. We can go check out and see if this works better on the front end. And there we go. See, now that's more representative of what the normal front page would look like itself. Note there's a little bit bigger than the content itself, so we can adjust a little bit and try and figure out, what does our size need, because it's rendering smaller. Yeah. So we can go take a look at this and try and figure it out. We probably need a higher height than they do to maintain that 3:4 ratio and get it, to stay perfect within our bounds. But that's easy enough to tweak because you can just actually increase these until you kind of get what you're looking for. So I'm good with adjusting this, trying to find where that right balance is. And depending on what images you use, you might have to adjust this a little bit. But I went with 366, which makes sense. I think I had those backwards when I copied them from them because it should have been a different setup. As you can see, it's already starting to look a lot more like the front end on theirs. The image is more scaled to size. We just need the content to possibly maybe go a little bit wider to drop that size down a little bit and take up a little bit less lines on the front end. So what we can do is just look and see how that is, and what the width is there. It's not going far enough. So we can go ahead and go back in and take a look at the front page. And what we need to do is figure out how to make that section wider for ourselves. So we can first take care of, we know the background is white. So when you go look, it's just going to be all white. So when you go into here, we can change our background to white, and we can just clear this up a little bit. Give ourselves that differentiator for our section versus the section below. And this way we can go ahead and look at this, and we need to go ahead and take a look at this. So what I was looking for is to find where you could actually set the amount of posts, because we actually need this to be 1, not 6. So we needed to go ahead in here into the query loop and actually go change it. But it's only available inside that little bar, which is why I was missing it before. But we only want that header to be one post, so we needed to go edit that to make sure it would only show 1, so that way that it would have a clean separation for the rest of the posts after there. Now this is when Edit Josh pops in and realizes that he's needed to keep that latest post section with 6.1, so he starts to go clean up himself and get rid of this latest post section. But I needed the latest post to still be 6 posts, so I have to go in and fix this one and just clone out a single post version of it instead. So I end up moving this back because I do need this on the front page, but I do need a single post version. So now these two exist, but I can go back into here, back into my group, and I can just actually delete this now. And I'll be left with just my single post inside here in the single query loop with just the single return instead. This way it's actually 2 independent pieces, which is what we needed. we needed one that would be the 6 or 9 or whatever set posts, and then one that's an individual single post for that first post, the most recent one. Now that we have that individual post up there, we now have our two setups to run our normal post and our blog roll itself with a lot more ease. This will allow us to customize this one while also leaving the other one perfectly fine below it. But we do have to put that same color back onto this group now. This will allow you to go ahead and grab that color again and put that on for that group. That way we've got that gray across the whole background again once we've made that mess and cleaned it back up again. So now it's starting to look more back to what theirs is looking like. And when you go look at this, we can change the spacing, get this pulled up a little bit tighter. You can take it to 0, but then things start to overlap. I tend to end up leaving it either between 8 or 12 pixels because the spacing isn't a bad thing to have. So when you do that and you look at the front end, it starts to get a little bit more cleaned up and a little bit pulled up. And you can adjust spacing as you need to for other elements as you get there. But I like 12, back to 12 again. And we get that little bit of space. So we get that little bit of gap between everything by default. Which is all good because it's nice to have that little differentiator there. So what we need to do though is we need to start looking at making this the right width overall. That would typically be done in the row. So now we can look at spacing that. Probably adjust 1200 to be full width, right? Which puts us back out. What we need to do is find that in between point. What we probably want is a 900 in the end or 850, somewhere in there as we try and figure out what works for this to do that right. As you see, this is me breaking a few things as I try and figure out what's the best way to get this part functionally sound, because there's so many different places where these widths can be set that I just want to make sure I get the right one, because we're looking for something that goes the right width and not too far but not too short either. So we're getting closer, so maybe expand that back out. Now when you refresh, it's getting pretty close to what the Mediavine one looks like. The only thing that would be holding you back at that point is maybe the shadow itself, but we can come back and fix the shadow in a second. So when we go into here though, we can look and see what we have set up as the shadow. Where is it? There's the shadow. So we can purge the shadow. Now if we remove the shadow and we go back to the front end, that shadow will be gone, and now we're just one solid color, so we're looking more and more like how that is done. See how they're just one big piece? So now you're starting to look way more aligned to their side. And what we can do there is just fine adjust a little bit if we want to. Give ourselves some space. So just so that there's some more space between the image and our text itself. I'll choose maybe 4 and give that just that extra gap. So now when we refresh again, we'll be able to see it. So here you tweak it again. You just got to find where it looks about right. It's not always about being perfect. We're trying to make it 99% of the way there. And once you get that, now you're already coming together. You're starting to look good. So now that top section is starting to look 100% like their top section would. Now, when you're looking at these parts, you can lock stuff. If you lock these, you can't edit them. It tends to irritate me more than anything, but it's good to know people that know that exists. Now the front page is where we get messy, because the front page by default doesn't have a sidebar in here. So there's one of two ways to try and do it. You can try and build it with a row, or you can just use the native columns and apply the columns. I'm going to speed this ahead to where I choose instead to do columns, just to save you guys the time, because this was a series of frustration attempts when trying to make it work with the rows and doing fills, and it's not worth your time. This was accelerated 20 times speed. I think in the end this took me nearly 45 minutes of pure frustration to just admit that this wasn't the right direction to go and that I should go ahead and move along on and instead use the columns because they'll fit to a specific width no matter what you set them to. This will make them just far more efficient overall and help when you're trying to do this right and to get it exactly what you're looking for, as opposed to the default here where every time I tried to set it to a fixed width, so I would try and set this to like a 30% on that column and then fill for everything else. I tried every combination possible, and every single time it just ended up in the sidebar imploding or the content not laying out correct. So coming out of here, you'll start to see a little bit better organization. We're building a paragraph, and then once we have the paragraph, we can start actually building our stuff. So we're going to build the group so we can set a width, and then we can add the columns into that. So now we add this, we add our column. 1200 width, maintain that the whole way through, 1200, and then columns, split it. I like to make these a fixed width, so I'm going to change this over. That way you have those controlled, and then I'm going to move this inside the one column for the sidebar, and I'm going to move the posts over into the other column. And then we're just going to delete that old one because that was just a mess. Now these are going to be well contained within their look, so we can go look at the front end. Now they're starting to look a little bit more controlled and a little bit more organized, but there is some shadows on some of the stuff in the sidebar. So what we need to go do is go find each one of these inside here and delete out these shadows. Now you will have to do it for each one that has a shadow because the boxes are linked to stuff, so you may have to go find a couple of them. But now you see we've got some space. We've got the area. We just would have to pull that part up. So we can go look at this. We can tweak this again real quick. We want to go ahead and make this that smaller width again because we need to pull it in a little bit. We need some gap. That way we can pull up. If we go too far, then you gotta go fix everything. So we just gotta play around with this till we get that right width. So once you're in here, then you start to get this about right. Then all you have to do is start looking at how we start organizing and managing this. So the easier way is how we'll go ahead, because it is functionally just more sound for us, because it's basically the whole sidebar is just kind of pulled up from where its base is. So we can go ahead and purge out like the search because it doesn't exist. We'll just rename it with this same information, and we'll build this as the box for the top. We can go ahead and get rid of this, and we'll grab this text, fill in some details so we have something to work with. And then we can go ahead and look at the group, and we can go ahead and make it. 1 second, we can go grab that little thin border, because on the front end it obviously has a border, so you just gotta get this, and then we want it to be lighter. I just don't want a pure black. Then we can go look and see there's is squared off, so we probably want to get rid of that curve. So we got to remove the radius off of this. That'll just make it nice and pointy. And then we've got an image that's up there, and so we probably need to go tweak this. We'll add in before. We can make this an image. I tried to look and see if we could do an author image, but this is just going to be a fixed image. Sometimes limited tools are limited tools. We want to make sure it's in the center, and then we'll set this super high so that it's basically a circle. We can grab that image, and then we'll go ahead and put that image in here. Now you see it's a little bit wonky because that image itself wasn't actually square, so we can go ahead and basically force this by grabbing the dimensions that they use. So if we take a look, they've got 100 pixels high by 100 pixels wide. So we can technically just set it that same way and get the same effect for ourselves. So just looking through, and you can look and inspect, so you can kind of see right there on the right side what the width and height are actually set to. That way you kind of understand how that part works. So we can go grab that. Even though it says the picture is that wide tall, we're going to just pull it in, make it those 200 short pixel values, so we basically make it a circle. Now we pull it in and it makes it a circle, which is fine. And then here you can go ahead and, I put this in the wrong place. Don't put it into HTML anchor. You need to put it into additional CSS classes. I'm just going to skip past this, me getting frustrated with what I set wrong. Now, back over to functionally, we're going to go ahead and realize that we've got this wrong. So we're going to go down here, take this out of the HTML anchor and put it back into classes where it should have been. Because then I can control with it. So now what we can do is go back into here and add a class and use that image class that we made, and we can go ahead and set the margin from the top as a negative number to pull it up. So we can use, like in this case, maybe negative 75 pixels, and then we'll just do important to force it. That way it pulls it up, right? So now it's pulled up and it's pretty close to how they have it, so I'm happy with that as a baseline. It's not necessary to go too much further than that. So we'll copy this and we'll go ahead and put it into the custom CSS just so that we have it always running itself that way. So we'll make sure we enable customizer. Save. Now when we go to the front end, we'll have customize, custom or additional CSS, and we can actually go add that down there. This way, now we're going to just go ahead and refresh, and it's going to be there every single time without a problem. But once you got that there, you just got to realize that the rest of the sidebars is also pulled up. So we also have to go figure that part out. So when we can go inside here, what we can do is look at, what is pulled up is the whole sidebar. So if we go find the sidebar itself group, we can actually go find where we can pull up on them. So we can make our own class specifically to pull the group up. So we'll just go ahead and grab that. And now we can do the same thing we did before. We'll take a look at this and inspect, because I always like to pull when I'm in inspect because I can see it in real time and adapt if I need to clean up something that I expected to work that didn't work. So when you're in here, you can go ahead and go add your class, and then you can go ahead and do another, basically with this one, negative margin again, you can pull it way up. So for margin top, you can do like a negative 100, 150, 200 pixels and start trying to pull it upwards. And then you can look and see, can you even see your class listed? If you don't see your class listed, then you might have put it in the wrong place or at the wrong element. More than likely that's what I did. But looking to try and find there's the sidebar about, so it's there. So Now I just got to target it. Now you do margin top, do that same negative. And then important just makes it win out over anything else that's targeting that. It's poor form to a point, and probably should be done in cleaner methods. But you can use this to play around now, so I can easily go up and down and try and stack it to where I think it needs to be. Now I can copy and paste that and go back over into customize, and we can add that into the customize also. That way that one is set and always happening. So now it's always pulling up and it's always in place. And when you're in the editor in the back end, it's going to look at the same place, but now you put the white back on there, so now it's got the white instead of the gray when we refresh. And now it looks like it's brand new and sparkly. So now we've got that sidebar settled and, looking basically like how Trellis does their front page. So now we can look around and see, and tweak these a little bit. I tend to go with pixels, and then I tend to do 300 pixels because most sidebar ads max out at 300 pixels. So I tend to set to 300. And then if you know that's 300, then you know this is going to be 900. Just to make 1200 pixels. And that'll thin up that sidebar a little bit and just make it look more visibly the same. And what we can do though is, even if I don't want to do the underline, we can go manage this easily inside here to give a little bit of padding. And what we do want is to have some space beneath that text, and we can go ahead in here and just kind of tweak that space just to give us that little bit of extra room around it like it has on the normal Trellis side, which just means going in there and kind of tweaking out the padding itself. And I was considering doing the underline part, but I don't want to go ahead and make a border on something. So we can go ahead in the bottom and just bulk out some padding and give us that little bit more space that we need. That way it looks more like the front side does on normal Trellis. So now when you refresh, you get that little gap. That way it's looking functionally how Trellis looks. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this space a little bit higher, pull it up a little bit more. That way you get that, about you image kind of like right on the front end. And we can tweak this again, go ahead and adjust this, see what it looks like when we push too far. And 900 actually works just fine. So really in the end, it kind of shows you that you kind of know the size more than you think you do. I mean, 900 was kind of what we went with originally a while back, and it's bounced around a little bit, but we came right back to there again. So in the end here, we can adjust these links to make them more like theirs. So the text is black by default, and then hover is that green. That way you get that same behavior. So if you refresh, it's all black, but it's green when you go over it. That way it has that look and feel of how theirs does. You could add in some fade ins and fade outs with some more fine tuning of CSS, but it's more a cutesy thing and not necessarily needed. So they did a button too, so we can actually use their button to go look and see what they did for the button and try and align ourselves. So here's their button. So we can just basically copy this and then basically functionally build the same thing on ours, but just change the color from the Trellis color link to the popcorn color link. So what we can do is go into here and inspect. We know we created a button class before. So what we can do is just go ahead and target our button read. And once we've got that in here, now our colors are a little bit wonky because they've got that Trellis color scheme that we don't actually have. So we can scroll down and you can actually go find where popcorn's primary color is. And you'll find them right there. So you just copy that whole string. And then you can go up and replace out the color here with this var. And then we get that green. That way we start getting what we need. And then what we can do here is the font size and those kind of things that we don't really need because we don't have a Trellis font size. But it gives us our framework, and we can go ahead and tweak this a teensy bit and then add it into our custom CSS, giving us those pretty buttons across the entirety of the content. So we can just change this out text-wise to white, and we get the nice, prettier button look. So what we can do is once we get through this, we can copy this whole block for that button, and we can go ahead and go into customize and drop this in for those buttons. And then once we have that, we can refresh, and now we'll have our buttons on the front end. So now we have the little bit of hover where it gets a little bit brighter, like as a hover action. So what we can do is go grab that too. So similar way, you can come over here, and when you're on the button, you can actually go over and look at what the hover state is, and then go down and find what the hover is. And then you can actually just go grab that, right? So similar to the other one, it's just a brighter version of the color. So what we can do is just duplicate the function that we already have, but with a brighter hover. So we'll just grab those two. And when we go over here, we can go ahead and just add that afterwards. But we'll grab this same top, and then we'll add a hover afterwards, so that the display is only on hover. And we can go ahead and look at the colors and try and figure out what we want to do, because we need it to be a different color. So what we can do is strip away all of that and just move over to that color and try and take a look at what color that is. And it doesn't look like it's much difference. So what we can do then is use any kind of color selector, which we can just go over and look and see and try and make a look at. So we can see it there, it exists, it's just a bad color. So what we can do is just go change this out real quick, because that's just saying that the properties value isn't right. So you can just go back into here and go change it to something else, and you'll see it's fine. So it's really, I think, because I had that bracket at the end on accident. I didn't delete everything, so now we know that the color works just fine. So if we go into customize, we can go swap that out, right? And it'll be fine, but the color will definitely be, wrong now when we do it this way. So instead, we can just grab that color and put it into here. We can go ahead and save it. Or, like in this case, we can go to a color and find a color that's a similar match to this. So this just gives you a chance to look at that color versus other colors in the scheme and find something that's a little bit close. So you want something that's just a couple shades off from it, and then you can grab that color. And then we can go put that in place. And now we can go take a look and see what this looks like. And now we've got that highlight effect, so that when you hover over it, it just shows them that there's an action that can be taken by landing on it. That way you get the overall functionality that we need for this. And you can change that color, obviously, because not everybody's going to be green, but you can just go find your shade or two off from the main shade. And then once all those pieces are together, we only have the quick work on the footer basically to do to be complete on the home page itself and through this front page. And what we see here is we still have a background that's that off color, so we need to actually go pull that off and make it white. So anytime it's in here, we need to go ahead and purge it and make it white, because we don't want to show gray down below for each post. So now when you refresh, that gray block is still there, so you got to go find which element has it. So you just keep moving up as you go look at the backgrounds, and you'll see someone in this group has a background still. There we go. So you just got to make sure it's white. And that way we get the refresh and the background will go away. And until we find which one, we haven't moved up far enough. So now we've got them all. So refresh, and now it's all white. Nope, if you look at it, it still can see a little bit off. So then you got to keep moving back down and see where we missed one. That one's on white, which is fine. That's what we want it to be. One of these we missed, so it's good to go look through. There's nothing, that's fine. Hey, no, that one's white, so we're good. Now, where did we go wrong? When you go look, I don't see anything still jumping out at me. So what we need to do is, no, maybe the columns overall, nope. There we go. Now when you go back to the front, we still see it. Sometimes welcome to the game of figuring out where you've left a background. This is why I wouldn't suggest putting backgrounds until you're through your build, and then you can know where you want to apply it, because sometimes backing through is unfun because just one element has it and it makes it there it is. See? You find the one element and now you're going to be gone. Now it's looking how it's supposed to. So now we can go back up to the top group and we can go ahead and apply it to the group that's supposed to have it. And correct ourselves. So now that we're on this group, we want to give this group that color. And now refresh. And we've got it all in place now. Now we have one broken post. So the single, this is because we cloned stuff. See, this is the price you pay for making changes earlier. Basically, we broke something, and then we just got to go through and fix the elements again. So we need to go strip out all those whites or replace them back with that other color. This is the price you pay for being messy. But once it's in place, you get that nice gray and you get that divider and that call to action up top, and now you have your nice organized looking top of the theme, and then all we have left is the footer. So looking at there is pretty straightforward. Go back over and we can go back and tweak our footer now. Alright, so we can go over to their footer and just grab a copy because it's a pretty straightforward footer versus other ones that are more complex. We can go down to the footer classic here. And really, all we need to do is clean this up and it'll be a very quick fix. So what we can do is just basically strip out everything here. So we'll scroll to the side and just actually remove this. And we'll just work with that group itself. So what we can do here is just add in what is just a row and center it. And then we can put in our text, right? So copy what they have. And then when you go look at it, it's just got a somewhat gray color like the header does at the top. So once you're there, then you just go ahead and drop in that section. So we go in there and we go ahead and drop in that background color. That gives us that dark gray that's there. Give ourselves some padding around there, and then we can go ahead and paste back in that content real quick. So now we've got it coming together. Note there's a little bit smaller, so you can look at the font size again with inspect and just kind of take a look and see what size they're at. 15, so kind of like the header. So we know from doing the header itself up here that we did like a 0.96 rem. So we can just copy that same size for this whole line. So we'll go down and actually just click on the button, change it to rem 0.96. Now we know it's the same size. We know it's aligned just like theirs. We'll remove these links because we don't need links to their stuff to mess with them. And then when you go to the front, you take a look, and look, that footer's already in place. They're ready to go. So now that we've got that in place, we have our fully built Trellis theme ready to go.